This topic is in contrast to a business level strategy which focuses on delivering a particular product to a particular market. In this case, we're talking about a company managing a portfolio of businesses. The degree to which they do more or less of that is referred to as level of diversification. It is also referred to as corporate as opposed to business level strategy. Here's an overview of the topics we will cover. Corporate level strategy asks what businesses should a corporation be in, and how should the corporate office manage that array of businesses. Notice the difference between this and business level strategy, where the business level goal is to attain a competitive advantage in a particular market. So, unlike the Porter and Rumelt ideas, at this level the concepts of financial portfolio management are more important than those of strategy and competitive advantage. There are various approaches to diversification, some of which we've discussed in the last lesson. You can acquire, you can diversify internally by starting processes within the company to create new and different products for different markets, or you can engage in joint ventures and strategic alliances. Acquisition is generally the most popular because it's faster and comes with less unknowns to the extent that you do your due diligence in seeking an acquisition. Internal startups can take longer and be more costly. Joint ventures and strategic alliances are more attractive when it's just simply too risky to enter the process alone without the requisite resources and knowledge. We discussed vertical integration in the last lesson, but other strategic alternatives at the corporate level include diversifying into related businesses, unrelated businesses, or both. Diversification can be classified as low, moderate to high, and very high, and there are even percentages attached to each of those categories in order to assess the appropriate classification. Knowing the firm's degree of diversification is important because it impacts performance. We would like to think that a highly diversified firm will achieve excellent performance. But as we see here, it is not necessarily the case that diversification improves performance. Real-world evidence based on studies show that high levels of corporate diversification are related to decreases in financial performance for the entire corporation. So diversification is not always a good thing. As shown here, economies of scope suggest that sharing activities and transferring skills can generate value through cost savings. But those savings are only achieved when companies diversify into related activities. Ultimately, what we're saying here is that Wall Street investors know that it is not possible for the managers of a company to manage a portfolio of unrelated assets and do it in such a way as to be maximally effective. Human resource capabilities simply cannot keep up with that level of diverse skill, capability, and talent. This is why we usually see a drop in the stock price of a company that is buying another company, while we see an increase in the stock price of a company that people believe is soon to be bought. Also recall the myth of synergy. Wall Street will easily discover when post-merger profits do not exceed the cumulative profits of merged entities. There are some excellent tools that have been developed for evaluating the company's portfolio of businesses. The Industry Attractiveness Competitive Strength Matrix is one of these tools. First, note that the size of the circle reflects the percentage of the company's revenues generated by that business. So in this case, the red circle generates most of the revenue for the company represented in this matrix, followed by the blue circle, the orange circle, and the green circle. Let's consider some of the extremes. The blue circle operates in a highly attractive industry and is accompanied by a strong market position within that industry. Each of the squares is color-coded to reflect the recommended action for that business. In this case, business A is considered a high priority for resource allocation or for receiving company funds to invest more into that business. In contrast, business D is in a weaker position in an industry that is less attractive. So the green shade indicates that this business will return less if it's invested in further. Business B is in a weak market position, but its industry is attractive, so it receives better consideration for resource allocation. So this matrix helps us to decide which businesses to invest in. Business B certainly should not be ignored because it is generating most of the revenue for the company. An obvious question is, how do we determine industry attractiveness and competitive strength? And this is where Porter's ideas come into play. The strategic manager must make those decisions based upon data relating to the 5 forces, as well as competitive advantage as a result of value chain management. Finally, all the ideas we presented in the last lesson relate to these decisions and the assessment of the business's position on this matrix. Here's an example from GE. Given GE's current condition, you might consider it an untimely example, but it is the case that they used this tool over the years to achieve their former prominence. Notice that you do not need to know the nature of the business in order to use the tool. It's only the numbers that matter. What has been added to this picture is the market share percentage for that particular business within the industry. Again, if we look at the extremes, the circle with a 50% market share has some of the smallest revenue generation for the company. So this might indicate that profit margins for that business are not as high, and this might be due to something like inefficiencies related to cost. But those are all maybes until we look into the actual business. The 40% circle might look really attractive to us because of the revenue generation, but also consider the idea that the competitive position is strong while the industry attractiveness is low. It could be the case that the industry might not provide the kind of future returns we would like to see, and the fact that we hold 40% of the market is actually an unattractive feature of that industry. This could be problematic. This is pure speculation on my part, but it might be the case that GE's current troubles are the result of one of its businesses being in this position. Here are the factors we must consider in regard to keeping a business unit within our portfolio. Notice that these are very different from the questions we ask when we look at the business unit from a value chain perspective. In this case, it is not about achieving a competitive advantage, but about contribution to the overall corporate portfolio.